Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. There was a huge debate on Parliament Hill, with MPs voting on whether or not to adopt an NDP motion recognizing Palestine as a state. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain how much chaos ensued following the NDP motion. And with the federal carbon tax set to increase and the remainder of the Alberta provincial fuel tax set to return, we hear from the Taxpayers Federation on how much the increases will hurt.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Some of the dignitaries offering condolences to the family of Brian Mulroney shared laughs and warm embraces before filing past the flag-draped casket of the former Canadian Prime Minister. Mulroney is lying in state near Parliament Hill with members of a Guard of Honour made up of Mounties and Armed Forces personnel. One of the guest speakers at Mulroney's funeral, which will take place in Montreal on Saturday, will be hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, who will deliver part of the eulogy. Brian Mulroney served as the 18th Prime Minister of Canada from 1984 to 1993. He passed away in Palm Beach, Florida on February 29th at the age of 84. There was quite a bit of debate in the House of Commons on Monday night as MPs talked about the NDP's motion to officially recognize Palestine as a state. Now, in the end, that request was withdrawn as there were 14 amendments to the original motion. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says it was important for all parties to work together on this very sensitive issue.
We worked on many issues together, but I think that the two-state solution definition was really important. As, of course, we know that Canada as a G7 country is sending a message to other G7 countries. And we've worked also very much on different issues, particularly being clear on the issue of Hamas needing to lay down its weapons, and also making sure that we're abiding by the Arms Trade Treaty.
So what do you make of maybe people saying that I know you're trying to create a consensus on this issue, but this may actually inflame tensions on both sides?
I don't believe that it will be, because I think people here in this House are elected by the different communities to represent them, and when negotiating, they're also representing their constituents. I know there's a lot of hurt on both sides. Coming back from the region, coming back from Israel and the West Bank, I saw how much people are hurting. There's not a single person in Israel that doesn't know somebody that was killed or kidnapped on October 7th. So the entire country is under collective trauma, and there's a lot of hurt.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly said there were a lot of people who took serious issue with the NDP's original motion.
The NDP motion said, nope, we're just going to say there's a state of Palestine and start dealing with them like they're their own country right now. The problem with that, Hal, is, as I said, and the Israeli government said, many Jewish organizations, many MPs in the House of Commons said, this would have rewarded Hamas for their October 7th terrorist attacks. There's a direct line between saying, we're going to do this, and why we're doing it. Well, we're doing it because of the war. How did the war start? Because of the October 7th terrorist attacks. It would have been a reward for carrying out brutal murders, rapes, and kidnapping, and that could not go on.
Make sure you catch the full interview with the always colorful Brian Lilly coming up after business news. Meanwhile, a strike by the Israel Defense Forces in Gaza City left several people injured and others under rubble. Here's some of the sights and sounds of what Palestinians experienced following the hit. Take a look and listen. Wow. Houthi rebels are stirring up more chaos in the Red Sea as they continue to attack merchant vessels off the coast of Yemen. As we hear in this next report from TBN Israel's Madi Shoshani, leaders are gathering to find a political solution, but so far, none has been found.
The two anti-ship ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen towards a merchant vessel in the Red Sea. The vessel, identified as the Pinocchio, great name, was not hit and there were no reports of injuries or damage. The Houthis, also known as Ansar Allah, are a Shia Muslim political and military group based in northern Yemen. The latest attack comes amidst ongoing efforts to find a political solution to the conflict in Yemen. The United Nations has been leading efforts to bring the warring parties to the negotiation table, but progress has been slow.
Well, closer to home, Environment Canada issued a special weather statement for much of our region here in southwestern Alberta today. A cold front is arriving soon, bringing more clouds, cooler temperatures, and a wee bit of snow. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, this cannot be happening since spring is officially arriving tonight.
Yeah, say it isn't so, Hal. I think April Fool's Day has come a little bit early because this has to be a joke, right? So we went from seeing some record-breaking warm days in previous days there to suddenly we're seeing this cold front move across Alberta, and it's going to plunge those temperatures from the double digits into the single digits, and then from the pluses into the minuses as we get into the coming days ahead, like tomorrow, right there, -3 for a high. With that is also coming some significant snowfall beginning tonight. We should see some snow tomorrow, and by Friday we're seeing 15 to 25 centimeters of snow. Could be even possibly in the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains where some winter snow fall warnings could be in place. And I guess the one positive is all the moisture we're going to be seeing for our friends, the farmers and the ranchers. But I'll be back later in the show to tell you just how long this cold snap is going to last.
Yes, good spin on it, Jeanette. Absolutely. We do need the moisture. Thank you so much. When April 1st rolls around, motorists in Alberta will be hit with a double whammy. The remainder of the provincial fuel tax is scheduled to return, which is another 4 cents a litre. Plus, the federal government's carbon tax is going up by 23%. The carbon tax not only affecting us at the gas pumps, but also with our home heating bills. The Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Chris Sims, says these taxes are really going to hurt.
We're pretty upset with the provincial government, to be frank, because the provincial government, it's easy to tear a strip off of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, especially if you're in Alberta. So we understand that the carbon tax is wrong. We understand that Trudeau is jacking it up on April 1st. But what a lot of Albertans don't know is that their own provincial government is also increasing its provincial fuel tax. In fact, it's increasing it by more than Trudeau's carbon tax. So as of right now, the provincial fuel tax is 9 cents per litre. They're going to increase it back up all the way to its 13 cent per litre tax. So that's a 4 cent per litre increase. Trudeau's carbon tax is going up on the same day by 3 cents per litre of gasoline. So it's a big double whammy. It's going to be a 7 cent per litre increase at the gas pump. So all those truckers delivering all of our food, all of our supplies, they're going to be spending more than $200 just in the carbon tax every time they fill up those big rigs. And then to your point on natural gas, yeah, that's going up to 15 cents per cubic meter. So by the time all this dust clears this year, Hal, the average Alberta family will be out more than $900 this year, just with Trudeau's carbon tax, with the rebates factored in. So that's a big hit.
Certainly is. Alberta will be hosting 6 international and national competitions featuring thousands of athletes from 35 different countries over the coming weeks. Government officials say over the past year, the province has provided $2.5 million in funding to support these events through the Major Sport Event Grant Program. The funds will help to support a number of competitions, including diving, volleyball, mountain biking, and even competitive boxing.
Starting tomorrow with the 2024 Boxing Canada Cup. We will also be supporting the Canada Junior and Senior Squash Championships, Canada Cup Diving, Volleyball Canada Youth National Championships and Paris Super 6 event, World Athletics Silver Continental Tour, and mountain biking at the 2024 Canmore Canada Cup and Alberta Cup. These events will feature over 30,000 athletes from across Canada and more than 35 countries. With these events and the athletes they draw comes enormous benefits to our province and the local communities that will see people staying in hotels, dining in our local restaurants, shopping at our local stores, taking in our beautiful landscapes, and building a lasting sense of pride in our province.
The Alberta government is providing $10 million over the next 4 years to expand and support women's emergency shelters. Officials say currently $5 million is being distributed to 17 women's shelters to create more spaces for those who are fleeing violence. If Budget 2024 passes, an additional $5 million will go towards those shelters over the next few years.
This funding means more women will be able to access supports in their home communities where they have built their lives and where their children have built their lives. The difficult truth is that family violence happens every day across our province. If we hope to stop the violence, we need survivors to have safe spaces in their home communities, places they can go that offer the protection and the support they need. And I'm so grateful for the valuable work women's shelters do to keep Albertans safe.
Alberta's NDP leader, Rachel Notley, says she's not happy. She's upset at what she calls the Alberta government's motel medicine. Notley was referring to an elderly man from the Edmonton area who was allegedly dropped off at a motel after being discharged from the hospital instead of being placed in a care home. She says the province must do a better job when it comes to providing continuing care, especially for our seniors.
Our grandparents, our parents, our extended family and friends deserve to live in dignity and to receive the high-quality care that we all expect, not to be hidden away somewhere in a motel along a highway. It is not too late to do what is right for all Albertans. So we are calling on the UCP government to amend the Continuing Care Act regulation and to include basic minimum standards of care that Albertans will be able to count on because it lives in the law.
Lethbridge police have laid charges in connection with the stabbing incident over the weekend. Police say they responded to a call at 1:52 a.m. on Sunday that a man and a woman were injured during an altercation between two groups outside of the Top Hat parking lot. Now, the investigation revealed that a 21-year-old woman who was at the club along with her friends was confronted in the parking lot by a 21-year-old man who had a previous relationship with her. The suspect pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Now, when a 26-year-old man tried to intervene, he too was stabbed and then run over by a vehicle. He was airlifted to a Calgary hospital where he remains in critical condition. The 21-year-old woman was taken to Chinook Regional Hospital and treated for her injuries. The 21-year-old suspect from Standoff faces a number of charges, including 2 counts of aggravated assault and assault with a weapon. He's still in custody awaiting his bail hearing. Well, it is tax season once again. Many of us are busy collecting documents and receipts needed to file our tax returns for 2023. Financial expert Kent Prestige says it's important to file when taxes are due, or you could face some serious financial penalties if you owe money to the government.
If you have a business, it's June 15th, but for most people, it's April 30th. And the penalties, you want to file on time. If you're late filing, it's a 5% penalty on the amount of tax that you still owe. And also, if you're late filing for a whole month, each additional month, they add another 1% to it. And on top of that, the compound interest daily at 10% for this year. So you want to file on time, especially if you owe taxes.
Get more valuable tax advice from Kent Prestige, owner of Prestige Consulting, as he chats with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our broadcast. Samaritan's Purse has officially transported one of its emergency field hospitals to Calgary. Officials say the reason is to increase the Christian agency's capacity to launch international life-saving medical responses. The tent facility arrived at the Calgary International Airport on Tuesday on board the Christian relief group's DC-8 and 757 cargo planes. Officials say the hospital will be set up at the Samaritan's Purse Canada warehouse. Melanie Webb served in the emergency field hospital abroad, and she says it is really fully functional.
So this tent hospital is mobile, can be anywhere in the world within about 24 hours and set up, has an emergency room, 2 operating theaters, ICU capacity, ward beds, lab, pharmacy, and imaging such as X-ray. So essentially a fully functional hospital. So we maintain readiness so that way when the moment a decision has been made to deploy a field hospital, for example, after an earthquake, we can have it packed up and deployed within 24 hours. So being able to deploy here from Calgary just expands our strategic ability to do that. So we have field hospitals based out of the US and now here also from Calgary. I've been privileged to be able to serve in and lead the emergency field hospital hospital over the past 7 years. So I've deployed to conflict zones such as Mosul, Iraq, and Ukraine, to natural disasters, hurricanes in the Bahamas, as well as earthquakes in Haiti and Turkey. Also some COVID responses where we had a field hospital to expand the capacity to care for COVID patients.
You know, thanks to viewers like you, the Operation Christmas Child campaign was another huge success. The Samaritan's Purse initiative helped to touch the lives of thousands of kids around the world. A mother and daughter in Acapulco, Mexico, praised God for the shoebucks they recently received after their home was destroyed by a hurricane.
Eran las 10, anunciaron que venía un huracán. Empezó el huracán a agarrar más potencia. Llegó a ser huracán categoría 5. Y lo que hice, agarrar a mi nena, nos metimos debajo de la cama. Mi nena estaba llorando, dice mamá, nos vamos a quedar enterradas aquí, era tierra. No sabía qué hacer, nos pusimos a orar. Mi papá golpeó la puerta, la abrió y pudimos salir. La casita estaba destruida, todo se echó a perder. Aún en la tormenta siempre era un arco iris.
Hola niños, ¿cómo están?
Me invitaron al evento. Allí jugamos al Piojo Juancho, oramos. Por favor, perdóname. Nos enseñaron cómo se hicieron los cielos y la tierra. Cuando recibí la cajita me sentí muy feliz. Trae colores, libretas y me trajo una carta. Se llamaba la niña Abby y tenía 12 años.
Es muy hermoso y verlas porque un regalo para los niños es muy significativo, más en esta edad.
Si me tocaría dibujar, yo dibujaría abajo yo y mi mamá en la cama, orando, y las láminas como se cayeron.
Nunca lo había vivido y fue a la vez algo tan duro, pero a la vez tan bonito de ver que Dios es fiel con nosotros. Y a veces la gente está pasando por momentos duros, necesitan una palabra o a veces un abrazo. Cristo te ama, Dios está ahí, aún en el momento más difícil de tu vida.
God is certainly faithful indeed. Wow. Well, those mid to high temperatures we've been experiencing over the past few days are about to leave us. The mercury will be plummeting and some snow is in the forecast here in southwestern Alberta. A full look at the weather pictures on deck. Well, spring officially arrives tonight, but guess who's paying us a visit once again? Old Man Winter. That's right. Jeanette Rocher is now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, confusing times right now here in southwestern Alberta. Yes, it'll be spring tonight, but it'll feel and look more like a winter wonderland over the next 5 days. And to think, I just put my Christmas tree away.
Yeah, well, you can put it back up again, Hal, because it'll look like Christmas again in the next day or so. Because look at this forecast right here. We are expecting significant snowfall and a drastic drop in temperature as well. So beginning this evening, we're seeing some flurries. We're going to be seeing some snowfall tomorrow. Well, by Friday, we are expecting 15 centimeters of snowfall as we get closer to the weekend there. So -3 for a high on Wednesday, -6 on Thursday, which, by the way, is the average low for this time of year. -9, we're going to plunge even colder than that on the weekend there. -9 for Friday and Saturday, -7 on Sunday, and then back to -4 on Monday. So it looks like this first of spring is actually more like the first of winter, unfortunately. Average high for this time of year, 6. Average low, -6. 18 was our high temperature back in 2007, and it was chilly, -21 back in 1958. Sun rose this morning at 7:35. Our sunset this evening at 7:44 p.m. We are now at 12 hours, 9 minutes of daylight. Okay, looking to the west coast tomorrow, seeing mainly cloudy skies in Victoria, 30 wind along the Juan de Fuca Strait there, 12 for a high. 11 expected to be the high tomorrow in Vancouver. Could see a 30% chance of drizzle. Edmonton sitting at -3 and seeing some snowfall begin tonight and then some periods of light snow ending by noon. Calgary very much in the same situation as Lethbridge with that southern Alberta cold snap, that cold front moving through. So Calgary could see snow beginning this evening, and by tomorrow, 5 centimeters. And then the same thing by Friday, looking at 15 to 25 centimeters of snow. Okay, a little bit cooler in the rest of the prairies, not so much with the precipitation, but what they are dealing with in this area are those very, very cold wind chill values, particularly in the morning. So daytime high in Saskatoon tomorrow, -9, but in the morning, looking at -24 with that wind chill value. Regina, -6, but -19 in the morning with wind chill, -10 for a high in Winnipeg. But get this, in the morning, -28 wind chill, which means a risk of frostbite. So very cold wind chill values. As we get to the central part of the country, Toronto seeing a 70% chance of flurries, 40 to 60 winds, high of 1 degree there, 3 for a high in Ottawa. Ottawa also looking at a chance of flurries and mixed with some showers there. And in Montreal, high of 5 degrees. Could see some flurries switching to showers there, as well as we get to Fredericton, could see a 30% possibility of some showers. 4 for a high, 7 for a high in Halifax with a mix of sun and cloud, and a high of 5 in Charlottetown tomorrow, and St. John sitting at a high of 3 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The inflation rate fell to 2.8% last month due to lower cell phone and internet services, along with slower growth in grocery prices. Senior economists say the report from Stats Canada shows the Bank of Canada's high interest rate policy is working to bring down inflation. The federal agency says prices for wireless services were down 26.5%, while internet prices fell 13.2% compared with a year ago. Mortgage interest costs, however, increased 26.3%, and rent was up around 8.2% across the country. Pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca plans to purchase a Canadian cancer treatment developer in an agreement worth $2.4 billion US. Fusion Pharmaceuticals, based in Hamilton, Ontario, is focused on developing targeted drugs that can deliver radiation directly to cancer cells. The acquisition is subject to customary closing conditions, including approval from shareholders. The deal is expected to close in the second quarter of this year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 23 points on the day to finish at 21,860. The Dow was up 320 points to 39,110. The S&P 500 was up 29 on the day to 5178, and the Nasdaq was up 63 points to 16,166. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 75 cents to 83.47 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to $1.74 US. Gold was down $2.77 on the day to $21.57.59 US an ounce, and silver was down 12 cents to $24.91 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.16 per bushel, barley's at $6.34, canola's at $14.31, and corn is at $7.49 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 53 cents to $188.05. Feeder cattle were down 53 cents to $250.68. And lean hogs April contract was down $1 to $85.83. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.70 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a number of dignitaries came out to pay their respects to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney as he lies in state just outside of Parliament Hill. The former Prime Minister will be flown to Montreal, where his funeral will take place on Saturday. One of the guest speakers to deliver part of Mulroney's eulogy will be former hockey great Wayne Gretzky. Brian Mulroney was the Prime Minister of Canada from 1984 to 1993. He passed away in Florida on February 29th at the age of 84. There was chaos on Parliament Hill when the NDP brought forth a motion calling on Canada to officially recognize Palestine as a state. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have more details for us in just a few moments and how that unfolded. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of local stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Henderson Lake Park Run invites all to throw on a pair of runners and participate in a free weekly computer-timed and recorded 5-kilometer walk, jog, or run. The park run is one of 2,100 park runs held around the world. Dogs on leashes and kids in strollers are welcome too. The park run begins at the Kinsman Picnic Shelter at 9 a.m. every Saturday. To register, visit parkrun.ca. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There was chaos in the House of Commons on Monday night over a vote on an NDP motion to have Canada officially and unilaterally recognize the state of Palestine. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Brian, talk more about the motion, why it's important, and how it ended.
The motion was important. I mean, there's two different motions. There's the one MPs debated all day, and then the one they voted on, and that's what led to the chaos. So we'll start with the one they debated all day. This was a motion brought forward by the NDP to try and really use a vote in the House of Commons to try and shift Canada's position on Israel dramatically in the direction of Hamas. And I don't speak lightly when I say Hamas. It included having Canada officially recognize the state of Palestine. This would be done in an official capacity. This would be done unilaterally and overturn Canada's decades-long policy of saying there needs to be a negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinian people before we get to a two-state solution, but a two-state solution being the ultimate goal. The NDP motion said, nope, we're just going to say there's a state of Palestine and start dealing with them like they're their own country right now. The problem with that, Hal, is, as I said, and the Israeli government said, many Jewish organizations, many MPs in the House of Commons said, this would have rewarded Hamas for their October 7th terrorist attacks. There's a direct line between saying, we're going to do this and why we're doing it. Well, we're doing it because of the war. How did the war start? Because of the October 7th terrorist attacks. It would have been a reward for carrying out brutal murders, rapes, and kidnapping, and that could not go on. It looked at one point like this vote was going to go ahead and that enough Liberal MPs were going to vote for it that it would pass. The Bloc supported it, the Greens and Elizabeth May supported it, the NDP, of course, supported it. In the end, the Trudeau cabinet was able to negotiate a series of amendments, 14 of them, which dramatically changed the motion and took out the part about recognizing the state of Palestine, put back in what our current policy is. And they announced this at 7:13 at night. The vote was supposed to be 7:15 at night. There were all kinds of claims of point of order, point of privilege. This is out of order. You can't change a motion this much and still vote on it. The Speaker of the House, it was Deputy Speaker Chris Detremont, who listened to his officials and said, no, this is an order. There were protests. They had to suspend the sitting of the House of Commons for more than half an hour. Then they came back. There was more debate, impassioned speeches from all sides. In the end, they voted on it, and it passed by a wide margin. More than 200 to 118 against it. So it passed with the amendments. I'm not sure that it should have even have been voted on. Hal, in my long time covering the House, which includes covering things like the same-sex marriage debate, the coalition crisis, the 2008-2009 economic meltdown, the Afghan war, I'm not sure I ever saw anything quite as chaotic as this. The only thing that would come close would be the same-sex marriage vote in late 2005. That would be the only thing.
You know what's interesting as well, Brian, is the fact that I watched some of the posts on X from federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh saying this was a huge victory for he and his party. But considering all of the amendments, it doesn't sound like it's anything near the original motion.
It's nowhere near the original motion, and I guess that is a good thing. Eventually, they got to a point where the Liberals needed to have a major Muslim organization like the National Council of Canadian Muslims say they would live with these amendments. And that's what ended up happening. And once they signed off on it, the NDP and the Liberals agreed to these amendments, brought them to the House of Commons. And as I said, with 2 minutes to go until voting was supposed to start, sprung them on MPs. They didn't even have a copy of the motion in French, which goes against parliamentary rules. And the Bloc stood up and, they were ready to support the original motion. And they said, we can't even vote on this. It's not even in French. That's how disorganized and chaotic it was. And in the end, I still think that because the Trudeau cabinet voted for it, including the Prime Minister, including Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who, used Hamas talking points on the number of casualties. That'd be like using Putin talking points in discussing the war between Russia and Ukraine. They all voted for it. To me, this says that it is effectively Canadian policy now, and it's taken our policy too close to Hamas.
So, Brian, even though the push to recognize the state of Palestine was withdrawn, you say the Trudeau government treats its democratic allies, which are at war, quite a bit differently. And I'm speaking specifically of Israel and Ukraine. Why is that?
Well, Justin Trudeau's line on Ukraine for the longest time has been Canada will be there with whatever it takes, for as long as it takes, for Ukraine to win against Russia, the people that invaded them. We say that we stand with Israel, and yet last night Justin Trudeau effectively said to Israel, Canada will stand with Israel until it becomes mildly uncomfortable for the Liberal Party of Canada. Justin Trudeau moved his vote because of pressure from people who either oppose Israel, many people who actually support Hamas in this fight, people who are misguided, people who are backing a terrorist group. All of these things are true. And Trudeau moved our vote based on that. If you want to know the difference, there are about 1.3 million Canadians who claim Ukrainian heritage. That's a sizable voting bloc. And, I know everyone talks about the size of the group across the prairies, especially in Alberta and to a degree Saskatchewan, but there is also a very large voting bloc in the west end of Toronto and Mississauga, where the Liberals have most of the seats. They need to keep those. And so they have been backing Ukraine to the hilt, and they've been playing domestic political politics, claiming that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives back Russia, which is groundless. You want to know why they're not backing Israel, despite that being Canada's decades-long position? Because there are only 335,000 Jewish Canadians in this country, but there are 1.8 million Muslims. And while no religious group, no ethnic group is a monolithic bloc, the Liberals are betting that most of the Muslim voters in Canada wanted to see them back this resolution from the NDP. So they negotiated to get to a point where they felt more comfortable with it. There was still 3 Liberal MPs that voted against it: Anthony Housefather from Montreal, Marco Mendicino from Toronto, and Ben Carr from Winnipeg. All of them have ridings with significant Jewish populations. All of them have been long-standing defenders of Israel. And kudos to them for standing up and doing what I believe is the right thing last night.
Brian, we're bracing for yet another carbon tax increase. The federal levy is set to go up 23% April 1st. It's not an April Fool's Day joke, unfortunately. 7 premiers have spoken out against the increase, including our premier here in Alberta, Danielle Smith. In fact, she even told Prime Minister Justin Trudeau he needs to fire Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault. Do you think that would actually happen?
That was a question that I believe it was my Sun colleague Rick Bell out in Calgary put it to him. And he had a very long answer for Rick, but effectively said, no, look, I have full faith in my environment minister, and maybe other people need to learn to work together better. Kind of a dig at Premier Smith. But Stephen Guilbeault, as we've discussed before, he is a thorn in the side, not just to your premier, but to Quebec's premier, to Ontario's premier, to British Columbia's premier, to the Atlantic premiers, Saskatchewan Scott Moe, of course. He picks fights with everyone needlessly. But it's depressing to say that he is one of the most influential cabinet ministers in Ottawa. He's not one of the most intelligent. He's not one of the most effective, but he is one of the most influential. He's one of the people listened to the most. And so, I've been told that other ministers have made fun of his comment that we don't need any more roads and have taken shots at him behind closed doors. Doesn't matter. The PM is listening to him. And no, Stephen Guilbeault is not going anywhere. Even though before the last cabinet meeting, I'd heard from both liberals and conservatives at various levels of governments that Guilbeault was a goner. He was going to be shuffled out of that portfolio, if not cabinet completely. Trudeau not only left him in, he seems to have given him a lot more rope and a lot more area to run and play in.
So is the Trudeau government showing any sign whatsoever that they may back off the carbon tax increase on April the 1st?
No, in fact, they're saying, Hal, if we don't have this increase, you won't get more money back. We need to have this increase so that you can get more money back. Otherwise, you're going to be poorer because you're not paying the tax. That is their talking point over the last several days, and it's mind-boggling. But let me just bring up on my computer here the numbers from the parliamentary budget officer. There's two reports from the PBO. One looks at the carbon tax on its own. One looks at the carbon tax and all the other effects. And the PBO says if you just look at the carbon tax, then it's revenue neutral for the government and most people get back more than what they pay. I would argue with that because that assumes several assumptions that I don't think are true, including what the average person drives. Average suburban person is not getting back more than they pay. A downtown person like me, absolutely, but not an average suburban person, for example. But when the PBO looked at all the other impacts, lost economic opportunity, higher prices, the GST charged on top of things, a slower growing economy, well, what they found was that 4 out of 5 economic quintiles, meaning 80% of people actually pay more than they get back. And so in Alberta, the only people that get back more than they pay in total are people in the bottom 20% economically. And they will get back, they'll be better off by a tune of $592 on average, okay? The next quintile, so if you're between 20 and 40, you're going to get back $62, or you're going to be paying $62 more than you get back. Once you get into the middle, you're down $1,400 in Alberta. If you're upper middle class, you're going to be down $4,000, and if you are among the highest income earners, your family's going to be down almost $9,000 a year just in Alberta. Those are staggering numbers, Hal, but that's the full impact of this. And it's not something Justin Trudeau takes into account, and it's not something that he will acknowledge when Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre stands up and asks about this very report.
So, Brian, bottom line, will the government's carbon tax increase, along with increases to the alcohol tax and soon to be enacted travel security tax, push inflation back up?
Absolutely, they will. So the carbon tax is going to go up by 23%. That will increase the cost of a liter of gas by several cents. It will increase the cost of diesel, which will in turn increase the cost of shipping, which will increase the cost of food and anything else that you buy that comes by truck, at least from within this country. So of course that's going to push inflation back up. The alcohol tax is going up by 2%. It was supposed to go up by almost 5%. They're celebrating as if they've given everyone a tax cut. They haven't. It's still going up. That will push up either the cost to restaurants or the prices at restaurants. And if restaurants don't feel that they can pass that cost on to you, the consumer, well, then that eats into their bottom line. That eats into their ability to hire more staff. These, they have negative economic impacts. And then on May 1st, as you mentioned, the security surcharge for CATSA goes up by 33%. It's already significantly higher than what they have in the United States or Europe, and we're going to put it up by 33%. You're not going to get 33% better service as people yell at you to take your laptop out of your bag at the airport. You're just going to pay more, and that means that your airline ticket is going to cost more.
The body of former Conservative Prime Minister Brian Mulroney is lying in state in Ottawa, Brian. Now, a state funeral is being planned this weekend in Montreal, and hockey legend Wayne Gretzky is giving the eulogy?
He's one of the people giving the eulogy. He is going to speak. Now, the Gretzky family have long been involved in politics. I'm told that in 1983, when Brian Mulroney won the PC party leadership, that the Gretzky family showed up in force for him. I've interviewed Wayne's uncle several times. He's run for office. He's run for the Conservatives in the past. It is a very much a political family, and due to those ties, there has been a connection between the Mulroney family and the Gretzky family. So I've talked to a lot of people about this who are shocked. It's not something that shocks me. Wayne Gretzky follows politics very closely, both in Canada and the United States. I've had the pleasure of meeting him and talking with him about these issues, and he's very tuned in to what's going on politically. So not shocked that he's there at all. The other speakers include Brian Mulroney's daughter, Caroline Mulroney, who is a cabinet minister here in the province of Ontario in the Doug Ford government. His former cabinet minister, Jean Charest, is going to speak. And so is Pierre-Carl Pelado, who is our former employer. He was the CEO of Quebecor when they owned both the Toronto Sun and the Sun News Network. And Brian Mulroney sat on the board of Quebecor for many years, was a bit of a mentor to PKP, as he's called. So those are the four people that are going to speak. Mulroney's body is lying in state in Ottawa at the House of Commons for today and tomorrow. Then it will be moved to Montreal, where they'll call it Lying in Repose, and that will be at St. Patrick's Catholic Basilica, one of the main churches for the Mulroney family in Montreal. And then the state funeral will be at Notre Dame Basilica, the grand church in Old Montreal that you've seen so many big name funerals at in the past.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, it's hard to believe, but tax season is here once again already, and almost inevitably there will be changes from last year, but it won't make things any less confusing. Today's guest has some advice on how to prepare your taxes and hopefully save some money along the way. Kent Prestige has decades of experience preparing taxes. He is the owner of Prestige Consulting and is also an instructor at Reeves College in Lethbridge. Great to have you on again with us, Kent.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so first off, when do personal taxes need to be filed, and what is the penalty if you end up filing late?
Well, April 30th for most people. If you have a business, it's June 15th, but for most people, it's April 30th. And the penalties, you want to file on time. If you're late filing, it's a 5% penalty on the amount of tax that you still owe. And also, if you're late filing for a whole month, each additional month, they add another 1% to it. And on top of that, the compound interest daily at 10% for this year. So you want to file on time, especially if you owe taxes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and those fines are for if you are owing. If you're getting money back, there's not a penalty, right?
There's no fine if you're getting money back, except for, you'd rather have your money in your hands right now, I would assume.
The sooner the better, right? Make some summer plans with it. Why
exactly.
not? Okay, so Kent, many people today just use tax software to file their tax returns. So sometimes it might be worth hiring a tax professional, though, to do the preparation. So why is that?
Well, I'll just tell you a little story here. I had a client one time who bought his own tax software and he filed his own tax returns. And then just for fun, he said, I want you to do my tax return for me. And I got $1,500 back more for him than he did on his own. And the difference was he didn't know what to claim. He didn't know what some of his exemptions were, didn't know what some of the credits were that he could claim, and he missed things. And it was actually $1,500 difference. So he was client for quite a few years. He then moved away. So he's not my client anymore. But certainly it does tell you that software is great. It'll do the math for you and it'll remind you about some things. But you still have to have a body of knowledge behind you so you know what to claim.
Yeah, that was a good lesson for him, definitely, and for our viewers as well. So, Kent, ever since the COVID pandemic, there have been a lot more people working from home, and up until now, the CRA had a simplified method of claiming home office expenses, but things have changed this year. So can maybe you explain a little bit about what these changes are?
Sure. So the simplified method was if you were working at home during the pandemic, you were allowed to claim $2 a day up to a maximum of $500 for home expenses while you were working from home. This year, they did away with that. They went back to basically the old way that you would normally have had to have claimed those expenses. You'd have to have the company that you work for sign a 2200 form, a T2200. And that form is, it allows you to claim expenses for working from home. Then now you have to keep track of all of your expenses. So let's say you set aside an office and it's 10% of your home, which is quite typical. Most people would take a bedroom and set it up as an office. And that's usually about 10% of your home. So you can claim 10% of your utilities, 10% of your interest, 10% of fire insurance, and any expenses that have to do with your home. You can also claim a cell phone and other expenses like that. But again, now you have to have records to prove all of these expenses, whereas last year it was just $2 a day, $500, no matter what you claimed as expenses.
Right, exactly. Okay, now I understand that there is an opportunity for first-time home buyers with the first home savings account to save for a down payment.
Yeah, actually, this is a pretty good deal. It's very similar to an RRSP. You can put up to $8,000 a year into this first homes program, and up to a maximum of $40,000. If you take that money, well, so it's sheltered from tax, so you don't pay tax on it while it's in there. When you take it out, if you buy a house with it, you don't have to pay tax on that money at all, which is a really good deal, $40,000, with no tax on it at all. So that's a pretty good deal for a first-time homeowner, yeah.
And it's such a great way to save as well.
Exactly. You're saving on the tax as well as saving for a house.
Exactly. Kind of a win-win there, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay, so are there potential tax implications when you buy or sell a home? Speaking of home buying.
Yeah, there's some new ones that have just come out here. Like if you live in your house and you sell your house, there's no tax on that, at least currently. The Liberals may change that, but at this point, there's no tax when you sell the house that you live in. But they're bringing in new rules against anti-flipping, where people will buy a house, they'll renovate it, and then they'll sell it. Now, you used to be able to claim the income that you would make on that as a capital gain. Well, capital gains tax treatment is better than regular income tax treatment. Now if you own a house for less than a year, it's going to be treated as income, which is taxed at a higher rate. So they're trying to, discourage people from buying a house and flipping it. Although it's still a great way to make money, it's just not quite as good as it used to be.
Oh, yeah, that's too bad for sure. Yeah. So any tax advice then to landlords who rent out their basement or rent out another house?
Okay, so first bit of tax that I usually tell somebody that's renting either a part of their home or renting a house or anything like that is don't take depreciation, or it's called capital cost allowance on it for tax purposes. Because what happens is when you sell a house, typically in the future, you're going to make a capital gain on it, which may bump up your tax bracket already by doing that. And then most houses don't lose value, they gain value for the most part. There are situations where they might lose money, but for the most part, they gain money. So then you have to reclaim all of that depreciation that you've taken over the years. When you reclaim it, it's taxed as regular income. So it could put you in a really serious tax situation, we'll say, if you do that. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I want to talk about when it comes to renting out a house, make sure you claim all your expenses. You're allowed to claim the property tax that you pay. You're allowed to claim any of the expenses that are legitimately towards the house. So make sure you claim them. I've had people forget about their insurance or something like that. And so you give them a phone call, remind them, and then they have to go search for it. But the fact is, claim the expenses that you're allowed to keep your income as low as possible.
Okay, great advice there. Let's talk about charitable tax donations. How beneficial is this? How much would it save on your taxes?
Actually, probably one of the best things that you can do is donate to a charity when it comes to tax treatment. The only thing that's maybe better than that is if you donate to a political party, but the politicians take care of themselves. But for a standard donation to a charitable institution, a church or something like that, the first $200, you're going to get a 15% tax write-off on that. But anything over that, it jumps up exponentially. For example, anything over $200 automatically goes to 39%. And then if you get into the really high brackets, you can actually get, it goes to 29%. If you get into the higher tax brackets, it could go to 33%. So anything over $200 at the 29% rate, you may not even be paying 29% because you're not in that marginal tax bracket. So there's actually a really good advantage to giving to charity.
Yeah, no kidding. We were talking about write-off expenses before about so what about childcare? Can we deduct childcare expenses from our income?
Certainly can.
Okay.
Yep. And it's a very good write-off. So again, if you're paying a daycare or something like that, make sure you keep your receipts. Make sure you turn them into your accountant so that they can claim it on your tax return as well.
Okay. How about moving expenses?
Moving expenses, yes, with some caveats there. You have to move for business, and pretty well you have to move out of town. You have to move to another town. But if you do move, again, make sure you keep all of your receipts, and not just for the moving company. Make sure you keep kilometers for the trip that you did in your own personal car, because you can claim that. If you have to stay in a hotel, make sure you claim the hotel bills. All of those type of expenses can be claimed, and again, that's going to reduce your taxes for that year. But it has to be a move for business.
Right. Oh, great advice there. Okay, so Kent, is it worth keeping medical bills to claim as a deduction?
Well, the deal on medical bills is you can claim anything over 3% of your income. So there's this limit on it. So, for example, if you just calculate, say you made $50,000 times 0.03, you would have to have more than $1,500 worth of tax receipts before you can claim anything. So, for the average person, $1,500 worth of medical expenses is quite a bit. But again, if you are a senior, then it's well worthwhile, keeping them because your income's lower, eh? So again, it depends on your income. It's 3% of your income, whatever your income is. So you want to make sure that, but keep them. If you buy glasses, a pair of glasses right now could be $800, right?
Exactly.
And you never know what other expenses might come up during the year.
It could really add up to that. And I mean, before you know it, there you go. And by the way, Kent, how long should a person maybe hang on to their tax documents for?
Well, legally, you're required to hang on to them for 6 years, but you also need to keep your current years. So it's really 7 years. And then you can throw out anything. But the other thing about taxes is actually your tax returns are statute barred after 3 years, which means Revenue Canada can't open up a tax return that's more than 3 years old unless you ask them to. So if you ask them to open it up, or if they find that you've done something illegal, then they can open up going back further. But really, for the most part, they're not going to go back more than 3 years.
Okay. What advice do you have for someone thinking about investing in an RRSP or a TFSA?
Well, first of all, balance the amount between the two. I used to be really real promoter of RRSPs until I went to a seniors home and talked to some of the seniors that were in there. and they had subsidized rent in this particular senior's home. So as soon as you take money out of an RRSP, it becomes taxable income. And in that case, it raised their rent. So these guys, right off the bat, a third of it was going in tax, then a third of it there was increasing their rent. So in the end, they didn't like RRSPs at all. But that's a rare case. For most people, an RRSP is good. What you have to remember is that it defers tax. It doesn't eliminate tax. You pay the tax, you just pay it down the road. On the TFSA, what I love about a TFSA is that you put money away, you don't get a tax bump right at the beginning, but any money that's earned in the fund is tax-free. And when you take the money out of the fund, it's not going to affect your taxable income. So again, if you're a senior, you take some money out of your TFSA, it doesn't increase your taxable income. If it doesn't increase your taxable income, it doesn't affect things like the GIS or your OAS or any of the other pensions that you might be receiving. So there's a benefit to both of them.
You either pay now or pay later, depending on which
Yeah,
one.
it's sort of like the old car commercial where they talked about an oil filter. You can either pay me now or pay me later, but you're going to pay taxes. The only things in life that are for sure are death and taxes, right? So
exactly. Okay, so if a person normally receives money back from the government after filing taxes, I understand that you can request a reduction in the tax withheld from your pay so that you can have less taxes deducted from your paycheck the following year.
Yeah, this is really true, and it certainly applies to people who are very charitable. They give a lot of money away. So what you can do is after you've donated quite heavily for a year, Revenue Canada then has a record that you're a regular donor. And so you can send them a letter in year 2 and say, I'd like to reduce my taxes at source based on the charitable giving that I do. They will then send a letter that you give to your employer, and your employer can reduce your taxes at source rather than having to wait for a whole year to get that tax return. So
wow. Lots of advice there, lots of great advice, and lots to think about for sure, especially during this tax season as we're all thinking about getting our taxes filed. Kent, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Kent Prestage is the owner of Prestage Consulting and is also an instructor at Reeves College in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.